How's your day going? Today on Psychological Depth, we'll talk about the topic, why being single is the smartest decision for men in 2026. Let's tune in together. There comes a moment when the world finally pauses, when the constant demands, the noise, and the pressure to prove something to everyone else start to fade. You notice it in the quiet, how heavy your thoughts have felt, how often you've carried expectations that weren't even yours. Days blend into each other with a relentless pace, and somewhere along the way, you begin to wonder if all this running, all this striving, is really worth it. It's in those still moments that a strange relief washes over you. Not the kind of relief that comes from escaping something, but the kind that arrives when your mind stops fighting. A calm settles in your chest, subtle but undeniable, reminding you that your worth hasn't been tied to anyone's judgment. You start listening differently, not to the voices demanding action or performance, but to your own. It's a small awakening at first, almost imperceptible, a quiet acknowledgement that it's okay to breathe, that you don't always need to fix, please, or compete, that the world's expectations can wait. And in their absence, clarity begins to emerge. And in that clarity, you find a strange kind of peace, gentle, grounding, and entirely your own. For decades, the path was clear. Work hard, climb the ladder, secure stability, then find someone to share your life with. Get married, and suddenly you were told your story was complete. Success wasn't measured by satisfaction or peace, it was measured by milestones, a house, a ring, children, the visible markers of a life well lived. Men learned early that approval came from meeting these expectations, not from listening to their own instincts. It wasn't entirely wrong. For a time, following this formula provided security, predictability, and a sense of belonging. Communities thrived on shared rules, and those who played by them were respected. It offered direction in a world that often felt uncertain. But it came with a hidden cost. The script assumed that external validation could replace internal alignment, that fitting into someone else's idea of completeness was enough to feel whole. Over time, for many men, the pieces didn't fit. Life's unpredictability exposed the cracks. Following the old roadmap sometimes left a quiet emptiness, a sense that they were performing more than living. The more they checked the boxes, the less certain they felt about their own desires, their own rhythms, their own definition of success. It's easy to forget that this path was designed for stability, not individuality, and that's why it feels misaligned now. The world men navigate today is nothing like the one their fathers knew. Every day comes with a barrage of information, opinions, and expectations. Digital notifications pulling attention in every direction. Cultural trends dictating how success, masculinity, and love should look. It's exhausting. The pressure to perform doesn't stop at the office. It follows into every interaction, every social feed, every glance at someone else's carefully curated life. By 2026, the cost of keeping up has become impossible to ignore. Burnout isn't a warning anymore, it's the baseline. Financial uncertainty, professional pressure, emotional labor, and the constant demand to appear competent, capable, and connected leave little room for introspection. Men have begun to notice a simple truth. If they continue to chase every expectation, they risk losing touch with themselves entirely. That recognition is quiet, subtle, but powerful. It's the first moment a man stops reacting to the world and starts observing it. He begins to see that stepping back isn't a failure, it's intentional. Solitude is no longer accidental or imposed by circumstance, it becomes a choice, a deliberate pause to evaluate, to recalibrate, and to reclaim the energy that was always meant for him.
To invest in focus over noise, and to understand that the most strategic moves often require a step back rather than a rush forward. The world is louder than ever, but men who learn to embrace the quiet are discovering something crucial. Clarity, purpose, and peace are not found in constant motion. They are found in deliberate stillness. There comes a turning point when a man notices how much of his energy is spent on pleasing others, how much time he devotes to explaining himself, fixing problems that aren't his responsibility, or performing a version of himself that earns approval rather than respect. The effort feels endless, like running on a treadmill that only speeds up with every step. For years, he may have believed this was love, commitment, or simply being a good partner. But slowly, the realization emerges. No amount of effort, no level of explanation ever guarantees understanding. Approval is fleeting. Validation is temporary. The more he gives, the more the world demands, and the less room there is for his own needs, thoughts, and ambitions. It's in this moment that perspective shifts. The man sees that performing is optional, that constantly measuring his worth against someone else's expectations is a choice, not a requirement. For the first time, he questions why he continues to negotiate for peace through effort rather than building it internally. Choosing self-alignment over external validation doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from clarity. It's the decision to prioritize internal consistency over the never-ending cycle of proving, justifying, and adapting to satisfy others. This choice doesn't punish relationships or avoid connection, it simply sets a standard. Peace and authenticity come first, and everything else follows. Stopping the performance releases guilt. It doesn't make him selfish, it makes him human. And in that release, he discovers a quiet freedom. The freedom to engage fully without compromise and without losing the essence of who he is in the process. Many men look back and realize that what they once called love was in fact a storm disguised as warmth. There were moments of intensity, highs that felt electric, and passions that seemed all-consuming. But alongside that fire, there was volatility, arguments that left the chest tight, unpredictability that eroded trust, and tension that lingered long after the words were spoken. Walking through those relationships often felt like tiptoeing across a fragile bridge. Every misstep, every minor disagreement carried the weight of disproportionate consequences. The highs were intoxicating, but the lows drained every ounce of energy, leaving behind a quiet exhaustion that no affection could mask. For many, it takes hindsight to see clearly. Intensity is not connection. Passion is not always presence. Excitement can be addictive, but it rarely builds stability. Men who endured these cycles discovered that the adrenaline of chaos often masks the absence of genuine alignment. The patterns repeat because the mind mistakes turbulence for engagement, mistaking emotional drama for care. This recognition doesn't come easily. It may arrive as a whisper, a moment of clarity in the aftermath of another exhausting cycle, or as a quiet question late at night. Why do I feel emptier when I'm with someone than when I'm alone? The answer is not failure, it's a signal. The chaos wasn't love, it was a warning. Understanding this distinction is freeing. It validates past pain without blaming oneself, and it reframes what many men once tolerated as proof of intimacy into a lesson in self-preservation. Real connection, they learn, is not measured in sparks or volatility, but in stability, trust, and alignment. The storm may have seemed irresistible, but stepping back reveals something far more valuable: the ability to recognize the difference between love that lifts you and chaos that erodes you. Calm is often mistaken for passivity, or worse, indifference. But in reality, calm is one of the most powerful expressions of intelligence a man can possess. It is clarity in action, steadiness in thought, and composure in the face of chaos. While the world races after drama, the man who cultivates calm is quietly gaining an edge that others rarely recognize. Stability is no longer just a trait, it is a marker of maturity. A man who can remain centered even when situations threaten to destabilize him demonstrates a strength that is far more lasting than temporary excitement. Emotional consistency, far from being boring, signals control, discernment, and wisdom. It is the silent authority that commands respect without demanding it. Choosing peace over emotional highs is not about avoiding life. It is about valuing endurance over spectacle. The adrenaline of constant emotional swings can feel exhilarating in the moment, but it comes at the cost of mental energy, focus, and self-respect. By prioritizing clarity and measured responses, a man protects his inner world, ensuring that his decisions are guided by reason and purpose rather than reaction and impulse. This calm becomes a form of influence. Others notice it even if they cannot name it. It allows him to navigate relationships, work, and life with a sense of control and intentionality. It transforms solitude and introspection from a refuge into a skill. And perhaps most importantly, it removes the shame that society has long attached to men who value stability over spectacle, quiet strength over constant validation. True intelligence, it turns out, is less about being heard and more about being steady, less about impressing and more about aligning. And in a world addicted to noise, that kind of calm becomes not only rare, it becomes power. Spending time alone is often seen as a choice for the heart, but it's just as vital for the body and mind. When a man steps back from constant interaction and external demands, his nervous system begins to settle. The relentless tension that comes from managing other people's expectations starts to ease, and with it, clarity takes root. Stress, long treated as a badge of productivity or attention, begins to dissolve in this space. The body no longer remains on high alert, bracing for emotional or social turbulence. Heart rate stabilizes, breathing deepens, and mental fatigue that once clouded judgment starts to lift. In these moments, decision-making becomes sharper because choices are guided by reason instead of reactive impulse. Focus, too, improves. Without the constant noise of external validation or emotional turbulence, the mind can devote its energy to what truly matters: projects, goals, personal growth. Sleep, often disrupted by worry or relational tension, normalizes, allowing the body and brain to recharge fully. The simplest acts, reading, planning, exercising, become far more effective when the nervous system is balanced and alert. Research shows that periods of intentional solitude enhance emotional resilience, improve clarity, and strengthen cognitive function. While a man may not understand every scientific term, the effects are undeniable. Better judgment, increased patience, and a deeper capacity to handle challenges without unnecessary friction. This is why solitude is strategic, not indulgent. It isn't avoidance or withdrawal, it is preparation. By giving the mind and body room to operate optimally, a man equips himself to engage with the world from a place of strength rather than reaction. In understanding the biology behind quiet moments, the choice to step back stops feeling abstract. It becomes a logical, even necessary foundation for long-term growth, stability, and fulfillment. The quiet hours of the morning take on a new meaning when a man no longer answers to the expectations of others. Waking early becomes a gift, not a chore. The sun rises, and with it comes uninterrupted time to move the body, to train, to strengthen, not for anyone else's approval, but for himself. Each repetition, each step, each breath is a reminder of control and discipline. The day continues in the same rhythm. There's reading, learning, and reflection, moments where the mind sharpens and new ideas take root. Knowledge isn't consumed to impress, it is absorbed to expand perspective, to strengthen decision-making, and to cultivate depth. Even the simplest acts, like preparing a meal or organizing a space, gain significance because they are done intentionally without distraction. Silence becomes more than the absence of noise, it becomes a companion. It allows thoughts to flow freely, emotions to settle, and clarity to emerge. There is no need to perform, no audience to please, no social cues to navigate. Each action is deliberate, each choice aligned with values rather than expectation. This daily rhythm, though unremarkable to an outsider, is transformative. It grounds a man in his own life and priorities. The solitude that once might have felt empty is now filled with purpose. By embracing this quiet, structured existence, he develops resilience, focus, and a profound sense of autonomy. In these small, intentional routines, the foundation of strength, peace, and personal mastery is quietly built, one day, one action, one thought at a time. There comes a moment when a man realizes that progress speaks louder than praise. The time he once spent chasing approval, trying to meet someone else's expectations, is now redirected toward his own growth. Each effort invested in learning, creating, or building compounds over time,
producing results that are tangible, lasting, and entirely under his control. Discipline becomes the new companion, replacing the distractions that once stole focus.
Early mornings, structured routines, and deliberate choices are no longer chores. They are the architecture of achievement. When energy is invested in purpose rather than performance, it multiplies quietly, creating momentum that no external validation could ever provide. Purpose itself becomes an emotional anchor. The highs and lows of relationships, the drama and unpredictability, no longer dictate mood or self-worth. Instead, fulfillment emerges from consistent alignment with personal goals and values. The feeling of being on course, of building something meaningful, produces a quiet confidence that approval from others could never replicate. This shift also fills the void that some fear comes with being alone. Where emptiness once lingered, there is now direction. The uncertainty of external dependence is replaced with the certainty of self-guided progress. A man learns that meaningful engagement with work, creativity, health, and personal mastery provides a depth of satisfaction that no relationship alone can deliver. In this space, partnerships become complementary, not central. Connections are no longer the source of identity, but a reflection of it. The man who embraced his purpose finds himself steady in solitude, strong in decision-making, and unshakable in his priorities. In 2026, the men who understand this are the ones who thrive, not because they avoid relationships, but because they have first invested in the most important one, the relationship with themselves. True mastery begins with the ability to lead oneself. Before a man can influence the world or sustain meaningful relationships, he must navigate his own impulses, moods, and choices. Discipline is not a punishment. It is the compass that ensures every action aligns with long-term goals rather than short-term comfort. Emotional regulation becomes a daily practice. The storms of frustration, disappointment, or desire are no longer allowed to dictate behavior. Instead, a man observes them, acknowledges them, and chooses his response deliberately. This is not suppression, it is control through awareness. Each decision, from how he spends his morning to how he responds in conflict, reinforces internal stability. Delayed gratification replaces instant satisfaction. The fleeting pleasures of distraction or validation lose their appeal when compared to the compound effect of consistent effort. Investments in growth, health, and skill accumulate quietly but powerfully, creating a foundation that cannot be shaken by external chaos. Solitude, in this context, ceases to be absence. It becomes responsibility. Every moment alone is an opportunity to refine character, strengthen focus, and practice the self-leadership that most men neglect. There is accountability without judgment, effort without performance, and mastery without an audience. Through this approach, a man cultivates authority that is recognized not because it demands attention, but because it emanates naturally from competence and integrity. Others notice the steadiness, the quiet confidence, and the deliberate choices. Discipline becomes both a shield and a magnet, a protection against chaos and a signal of reliability and strength. In 2026, the men who embody this principle are not just surviving, they are shaping a life of intentionality. Leadership starts within, and from that center, everything else flows with clarity, purpose, and unwavering strength. Peace is not just a mental state, it is a form of biological repair. When a man steps away from constant stress, his body begins to recalibrate. The tension accumulated over years of work, obligations, and emotional labor slowly dissolves. Heart rate steadies, blood pressure stabilizes, and the nervous system, long held on high alert, finally has a chance to recover. Sleep, often fragmented by worry or the weight of expectation, becomes deeper and more restorative. The mind clears, focus sharpens, and decision-making improves. Every small choice, what he eats, how he moves, when he rests, starts to compound, producing benefits that are invisible at first, but undeniable over time. Physical recovery follows naturally. Muscles heal more efficiently. Energy levels rise, and the body begins to operate in rhythm rather than in reaction. The quiet moments once feared as loneliness transform into opportunities for self-maintenance, strengthening resilience and protecting against burnout. This restoration is not indulgence, it is strategy. A man who prioritizes peace is investing in longevity, mental, emotional, and physical. The clarity and calm he cultivates daily act as armor against the unpredictable pressures of life. Health is no longer reactive, it is proactive, guided by a sense of purpose and understanding of the body's natural rhythms. For men in their 40s and beyond, these effects are transformative. Energy is preserved, focus is regained, and the body and mind operate as allies rather than adversaries.
In a world addicted to chaos and overstimulation, choosing peace becomes a form of self-preservation, a way to restore what life has worn thin, and a foundation for strength, resilience, and enduring clarity. Solitude doesn't mean isolation, it means choice. The man who has stepped back from constant external pressures begins to see his relationships differently. He no longer spreads himself thin across shallow interactions or engages out of obligation. Instead, he invests in a smaller circle of people who truly matter, nurturing connections that are authentic, mutually respectful, and meaningful. Quality takes precedence over quantity. Conversations are deeper, moments more intentional, and time spent together feels like nourishment rather than performance. There is no need to prove worth, entertain, or appease. Friendships are no longer measured by frequency or proximity, but by trust, understanding, and alignment with shared values. This selective approach creates a sense of social freedom. Without the noise of unnecessary obligations, a man can choose who he engages with, when, and on what terms. The fear of loneliness fades because the focus shifts from being surrounded by people to being surrounded by the right people. Each interaction becomes purposeful, each relationship a reflection of his values rather than a demand on his energy. Solitude, in this light, is no longer empty. It is a filter. It separates connection from distraction, authenticity from performance, and alignment from compromise. A smaller, more intentional circle allows a man to engage fully and deeply without the constant pressure of social validation. In 2026, the men who understand this live freely. They are present in their connections, focused on growth, and anchored in their own priorities. Their social lives are not about filling space, but about enriching it. The result is not isolation, it is clarity, choice, and a profound sense of freedom that only intentional connection can provide. Emotional maturity begins with awareness, the quiet ability to observe thoughts, feelings, and impulses without being controlled by them. A man who's embraced solitude learns to distinguish between reactions and responses, choosing reflection over reflex, understanding over judgment. He no longer allows fear, insecurity, or societal pressure to dictate how he acts. Self-awareness becomes a daily practice. He examines patterns in his behavior, questions motivations, and identifies the ways past attachments shaped him. He notices when emotions are triggered by old fears rather than present reality. This clarity allows him to act intentionally instead of habitually, to set boundaries without guilt, and to engage in relationships without losing himself in the process. Emotional intelligence, once abstract, now manifests in tangible ways. He can listen without needing to reply immediately, empathize without overextending, and hold space for others without sacrificing his own equilibrium. The intensity of emotional highs no longer commands him. He navigates feelings with steady hands, understanding the true connection grows from balance, not drama. He also recognizes fear-based attachments, when dependency masquerades as affection or when anxiety is mistaken for passion. Instead of clinging, chasing, or overcompensating, he evaluates whether interactions align with his values and long-term goals. This discernment doesn't create distance out of avoidance, it creates depth, protecting his energy and preserving integrity. In a world where impulsive reactions are celebrated as passion, this kind of emotional discipline becomes a quiet superpower. It positions him as evolved, capable, and grounded, without arrogance or performative displays.
His calm, measured presence communicates strength and stability more effectively than any argument, drama, or constant effort ever could. By mastering his inner world first, he approaches life, work, and relationships from a place of clarity, resilience, and understanding, making every connection intentional, every decision wise, and every moment of solitude productive. For much of life, success is defined externally: the promotions, the house, the recognition, the milestones everyone else expects you to reach. But a man who has spent time in reflection begins to see a different measure. A measure not dictated by timelines or social approval, but by alignment with his own values. Quiet success becomes his standard. It doesn't require announcements, applause, or public validation.
It's found in waking up with purpose, completing tasks that matter, and seeing progress in areas that are meaningful to him, even if the world never notices. Each step forward is self-evident, its significance felt rather than performed. Comparison loses its power. The achievements of others no longer determine his self-worth or urgency. He understands that what matters most is consistency, growth, and alignment with personal goals. Social pressure fades into background noise, and the life once measured by checklists becomes a life measured by clarity and intentionality. Enoughness becomes a quiet companion. Satisfaction is no longer conditional on external recognition or constant acquisition. The man learns to appreciate what he has, what he builds, and who he is. This doesn't mean complacency. It means freedom from endless striving for validation, the kind of freedom that allows him to grow without anxiety, to create without distraction, and to engage with the world on his own terms. In 2026, redefining success is less about chasing a socially approved narrative and more about constructing a life that feels coherent, purposeful, and complete from the inside out. It is the peace that comes from knowing you are living in alignment with yourself, and the quiet confidence that happiness doesn't require permission, it requires presence. Being alone is not a gap to fill, it's a strategy. It is a conscious choice, a deliberate subtraction that creates space for clarity, growth, and alignment. The man who embraces this understands that freedom is not given, it is claimed. He does not settle for noise, drama, or fleeting validation because he has discovered something far more valuable: himself. Peace becomes his home. It is not dependent on another person, a relationship, or external approval. It is cultivated in silence, discipline, and intentional living. Every decision, every boundary, every routine reinforces this inner sanctuary. Solitude is not absence, it is presence, a mastery of life on his own terms. This is the quiet strength that 2026 demands. The man who chooses this path is not avoiding love or connection, he is honoring his own worth first. He walks through the world unshaken by expectation, calm in chaos, steady in purpose. You do not need permission to exist fully, to grow intentionally, or to protect your peace. Being alone is not emptiness, it is power, clarity, and freedom. And once you see it this way, you never look back. So, what are your thoughts on today's topic? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel Psychological Depth so you won't miss any of our upcoming posts. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.